What's up? What's up? What's up? Hey, I'm Anthony Alden. Checking in, seeing what's going on, letting you know what's going on this side of the art world. I woke up this morning and I was just thinking about the state of black art, black artists. And I've been part of the art culture as a creative, as a photographer, an art enthusiast, well over half my adult life. And it's not a good thing. The picture is very bleak. Now, mind you, this is very subjective. This is just my perspective, but my perspective spans over a period of 30 years in the art game, as well as, owning multiple galleries, publishing art, touring around the country, selling art, managing the collection, the art collection of a family member, particularly my brother Marvin Vines. So I think I've had a good perspective on the art world. I probably became fully engaged in art to the point where I wanted to create a business from selling art, manufacturing art, distributing art, exhibiting art back in 1999. So that's been 26 years. And I'd be a lie to say I've never made money in art. But I've spent a lot more than I've made building the blueprint of what I felt could be potentially a lucrative business venture, but I beg to differ at this chapter in my life after evolving and seeing the things that I've seen in art and talking to artists, and more particularly elder artists. Marvin, when I first ventured into getting a better understanding of art and wanting to work with art, I asked my brother, I said, Marvin, you got all this art. Man, you should be rich. He looked at me. He said, hey, if I depended on people buying my art, I would be out on the street starving and homeless. I have an education. I work a job to put food on my table. My art, this is just what feeds my passion. I love the art of creating. And it took me back a little bit because I was like, wow, I never thought about that. And Marvin was in the game for, started out 11 years old, 10 years old, formerly being trained by the Toledo Museum. So he got a master's degree. So Marvin has not only was an intelligent man, but he's a very talented artist, well trained, well educated. And to hear that come from my brother, it forced me to not go out here in the art world being idealistic about the potential to build a successful art business, but the reality that for the most part, people, particularly black people, don't support black art. The evolution of Marvin's work was, I think, a lot of his early pieces were big pieces, and you forget about that. To get a big piece of canvas and the paint, it can be quite expensive. It's an investment, to say the least. And yes, Marvin has sold a lot of his early works, originals. I've several times a month I run into people, who delighted the fact that they bought an original piece. They got an original piece of Marvin's artwork back in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. I think after we hit the new millennium, well, Marvin passed away in 97. So since I've had the original collection and the estate, I think sold maybe 2, maybe 3 original pieces. Hasn't been many. I haven't really tried to sell it because, when Marvin passed away, the art of producing art ended. Everything he produced throughout the course of his life was part of his collection. So, nothing being manufactured after he died. So the collection that original collection was something that I had to try to figure out a strategic way to not only to preserve it, but also to how to make money from it. Because galleries aren't cheap. Getting staff is not cheap. Buying equipment is not cheap. Framing art is not cheap. Copying art is not cheap. Printing your art is not cheap. It all requires money. And if you're not making the money through the sale of art, then you sort of got all this artwork that you got to figure out, okay, well, where am I going to produce it? If nobody's not going to buy it. And so I guess what I would, if a young person asked me, yo, Mr. Vines, I want to be an artist. What do you think? I will first tell them, are you passionate about what you do? They were to say yes. I would say, will you still be passionate about what you do if you didn't make no money from what you did? That's always the getter. That's always the question that sort of makes a person reel back and think, I don't know. And my answer would be, if you're not passionate about what you do, and if you're not okay with not making money, but probably spending more money than what you do, then you probably shouldn't be in this game. Or you should just do it as a hobby and just enjoy it. Just do it as in your free space and time, and to create and produce art. But when you start thinking that this art is going to provide you with a lucrative lifestyle and living, well, you got another thought coming, man. Becoming a successful artist where you can eat off what you create and produce is like hitting the lottery. And I'm talking about a six-figure lottery at the minimum. I ain't talking about the, as I said, the smaller the amount, the greater your chance that you'll hit the lottery, that you'll buy a lottery ticket and you'll profit. But the more complicated and odds increase, that chances are you're not going to hit a lottery and get that $1 million major six-figure hit. So, yes, in my mind, it's if you're not, Marvin was, for example, Marvin was very passionate about what he did. Marvin would go work at the Toledo public school system for 8 hours. Typically got out of school 2:33. Got home 4. Marvin had a paintbrush in his hand by 4:30 in his studio. And Marvin would work well into the night, depending on what he was working on, probably his mood, his spirit, what his spirit was feeling. And on the weekends, you go by to Marvin's house, he was painting. Marvin was always creating and producing, nonstop. I think probably in Marvin's lifetime, he probably produced well over 1,000 original images. And of course, we don't have that many in the collection, but nowhere near that. But a lot of them were, distributed, among, some within the family. At least the siblings, most of the siblings had, at least 3 to 4 plus pieces of Marvin's work. And then the work that he sold to the community. Marvin did not have an easy journey as an artist. He struggled. And I know he had to be quite frustrated because he was so, and I might be biased, Marvin is one of the greatest artists I've ever seen. And I'm not saying this because I'm his brother, because we've exhibited where hundreds of artists are in the same space and time where we are exhibiting that. And when you got artists who come to your booth and say, man, how did he do that? Who is this dude? I mean, so no matter what accolades you get, at the end of the day, can you eat off of it? Can you eat off of it? Selling black art is one of the most difficult things to sell. Unlike sneakers, clothes, hats, jewelry, the list goes on. Stuff that black folk specifically like to invest their money in. Art, unfortunately, is not one of the things that black people like or are willing to invest their money in. I can count more friends and people who I've gone in their house, in their homes, who've had black artwork hanging on the walls than individuals that just didn't have nothing on their walls. And then don't even have a clue. Don't even have a conception. I even seen a lot of black people. The more money you make, it's like a lot of black people don't like black art on their wall. They like, I got a diversity of friends, so I can't represent too many black people on my walls because somebody might think I'm pro-black, which may translate that I'm anti-something. So, black art is not a necessity. It's not something that a majority of black people, they may appreciate it and admire it at a distance. But when it comes to purchasing and buying art, people just are not going to make the investment. And that's the reality. And I think Marvin made me aware of that if you're not going to do this and be passionate about it, then don't do it. Because if you think you're going to go and make $1 million and it ain't going to happen. 9 times out of 10, you're not going to hit this lottery. You're not going to hit the lottery with art. And in future episodes, I'll go into more, a deeper perspective of what I've seen. And I've seen a lot in art, and sometimes, it's like, where you begin. I mean, there was a period which I wanted to become an art appraiser because I felt like everybody, when you work, when you have galleries, you're constantly having people coming in and who got artwork, who are artists themselves, and they're asking questions. Well, how much should I sell my artwork for? Which is always one of the most difficult questions to answer. How much should you sell your artwork for? And particularly original artwork. Should I sell it for $100, $500, thousands of dollars? I don't know. I don't know where to begin. I think the starting point is just being realistic. How big is your collection? If you got 10 pieces of art, do you really want to start selling your art with only 10 pieces? At least build your collection of art, your creative collection. I've seen artists who've been painting for 20, 30 years and only have maybe 30, 40 originals, but have created hundreds of originals. But they've been trying to make money and live off their art, and probably in addition to other things. So they undersell their art for next to nothing, just to hey, I got to pay rent this month, so I got to sell enough. So what do you want to give me for it? It's not what I want, because what I want for it, 9 times out of 10, the consumer is not going to buy it, because there's black people, we just don't appreciate black art. And I think one of the reasons why black people don't appreciate black art, because we have an issue with being African. We have an issue of being black. We don't want to see black people on our walls. And Marvin in particular, it's not to say that his whole collection is very diverse. In the 70s, I mean, his subject matter was across the board. Black males, was inanimate objects, portrait studies, landscapes, eggs, just figurative stuff. I mean, Marvin perfected 8 mediums: acrylic, oil, leather, pencil, airbrush, among others. But for the most part, I would have to tell an artist that if you're not passionate about what you do, if you're not producing and creating art that makes you happy, your art as an artist, I say, well, we named our publishing company Soul on Canvas. Started it in 1997. A little before Marvin passed, probably about 1990. Marvin passed in 97, so I think I might have started in 1994, somewhere in that area. We started that company, and the name came from the reality that artists paint their souls onto canvas. And wow, man, you as an artist, you're conveying your story, your life, your perspective, your creative perspective. I mean, at the end of the day, you really can't put a value on that. You done painted your entire soul on canvas. So, trying to figure out the appraisal of art, I still struggle with that reality, and to backtrack a little bit. When I had an interest in being an appraiser, I was Googled it and researching it, and it was a New York Institute of the Arts had art appraisal program, and I gave them a call. This was in the 90s, and I said, I'm interested in being an art appraiser. And they indicated, what genre of art? I said, African American art. And the lady says, well, I'm sorry, we don't have an African American system of appraisal for art. But we do have Native American. We do have Mexican art. We do have European art. We do have, all the other genres of art, but nothing specifically a program that's going to focus on African, in particular African American art. In fact, I think we have a tendency to admire the indigenous African art more so than we really appreciate the figuratively speaking, and the figurative images that black artists paint and represent of themselves. We, and particularly white people, they'll buy some African mask, but they're, can't recall any time I've ever went into a white person home and seen some artwork of a black person. In fact, that would probably shock me. But I'm going to, I think one of my videos or audio talk is going to focus more so on just the art industry, the art culture, and the struggle of becoming an artist. And one last point before I go. I've known a lot of elder artists who were not, made a lot of money off their artwork. And unfortunately, when they've passed away, their art ended up scattered through the family, in Goodwills, thrift stores, thrown in the garbage, left unattended to the point where they just throw it in the attic and it just eventually just deteriorates. You know, when an artist die in the black community, typically his art die with him or her. Nobody's going to really keep the legacy afloat. That was one of my reasons why I stepped up, because I felt my brother's art was worth preserving. And his work was so timeless. And every piece he created conveyed a message. Some were, you can see outright, but some of it was figurative and abstract that you had to really think. Marvin's art made you think. What was this dude thinking about when he painted this image? I got probably about 20 journals of Marvin's, writing journals, and I've been reading those over the past more so year or two, and I'm getting a better understanding of who he was as a person, as a human being, as a creative. Marvin was a very complex person, and so complex that I wanted to share the world what my brother created in his lifetime. And it's a collection of thoughts of fine art that I've never witnessed, particularly his series on the black male, which we end up calling Endangered. The choice is yours. And it was almost like Marvin had to be a suicide artist to paint black men in the 80s and the 90s. Who's going to put a black man on their wall? Deemed the most hated creature to walk the earth. Yes, the black man. Nobody wants to see a contemporary black male on their walls. And I think Marvin knew that. But Marvin had to paint this image that he wanted the world to see of the black male, because he wanted to change the perception of urban youth. He wanted to illustrate them in an artistic perspective. And it wasn't about whether nobody was going to buy it. It was about this was the image that was in his mind, and he wanted to get it out here. He wanted to see, he was a high school guidance counselor, and he wanted the world to see the black male from a different perspective. Nothing to be feared. Intimidated. And he made his subjects black. Chocolate black. With rippling muscles and everything that the white world feared about the black man. Marvin was, hey, this is who we are. We're powerful. We're unapologetic. And we're beautiful. When Marvin passed, so was the baton. And I gladly picked it up and started running with it. Anyway, to be continued. We'll talk further about the art industry and the struggles of being an artist. And I think in the future I'm going to, really come from that perspective, because I think young people really need our youth, as well as, I always say people don't participate in the purchase of art because oftentimes they're ignorant on not understanding art. People aren't educated about art. And I think that's one of the things that, in my creating and building galleries was one of my goals, is to try to present art and educate people with the, black imagery, strong black imagery. And, but we'll talk about that. To be continued. Anthony Alden Vines.